The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 10, The Studio Boss. I've brought you many subjects with many different paths that they took to achieve their Hollywood ambitions. But for the most part, all of our subjects' paths have taken them to the silver screen. Stardom in the bright lights of the glitz and glamour of the Hollywood lifestyle. The majority of our stories have involved frontline stars, regular players known throughout Tinseltown for their acting prowess. But tonight, we bring you a tale about a power from behind the scenes. A man who moves and shakes the Hollywood scene with a snap of his fingers. And when he snaps, oh, you better listen, for you do not want to pay the consequences that follow if you don't. Our story brings us to a place where you're bound to see a celebrity at any moment. The who's who of Hollywood, from the stars that perform in the movies to the executives and power brokers that financially make it possible, can all be found right here. If you pull up a chair, welcome to the Brown Derby, one of Hollywood's most influential eateries. Deals are made all the time concerning the future of Hollywood right in this historic restaurant, and our subject holds court in the corner booth. Meet Jack Fontaine, or Mr. Fontaine to you, studio chief of Fontaine International Pictures. You can always find him sitting at his favorite spot from Monday to Friday between the hours of 10 a.m. to 4 in the afternoon, conducting business. As you can see, we've caught him in the middle of business now. He sits at his booth smugly, with a Cuban cigar in one hand and the other stirring cream into his coffee. He's surrounded by every variety and entertainment column, magazine and newspaper that's in circulation, keeping informed with everything that's going on around him, investigating every rumor that pertains to his affairs, business and personal, no matter how big or how small, because no one will ever get the jump on Mr. Fontaine. He's a ruthless businessman, as you can see by the way the gentleman sitting across from him is trembling ever so slightly during this meeting. Mr. Fontaine might be getting older, but he still is an imposing figure as he sits and stares at you with his dark hazel eyes, puffing on his cigar, his hair slicked back and mustache greased, draped in his black $1,000 suit, never moving, just continuing to stare with an expressionless face, taking it all in. Well, it looks like, by the reaction of the gentleman getting up and running out, and Mr. Fontaine's snarled, screaming face, that the meeting did not go according to plan. These things tend to happen, especially with Mr. Fontaine. He knows what he wants and knows talent, what sells and doesn't sell. He always has. He got his start in Hollywood working with Howard Hughes at RKO, barely graduating with his business degree. Mr. Fontaine was known as a rough, someone brought in for their physical prowess, if you will. He worked on behind-the-scene problems, contract negotiations, and things of the like, but all the while learning the tricks of the trade and how everything worked and was run, eventually putting that business degree to good use. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming head of script approval and production. This is where he made a name for himself at being able to spot talent and scripts that would turn into successful pictures by greenlighting several successful projects, such as the Western Fort Apache, starring John Wayne and Henry Fonda. Also the film Rachel and the Stranger, starring Loretta Young, William Holden, and Robert Mitchum. Not long after, however, Mr. Fontaine moved on. He also had a talent to see situations and their outcomes, and he could see how the instability of Howard Hughes would bring difficult working conditions, and he was right. He moved to MGM Studios, taking over the same position, and grew his reputation exponentially. Every hit of the 1950s for the studio he greenlit for production, from all of the famous popular musicals and the popular romance and comedies to the award-winning films, he had a say in them being produced, including numerous Oscar nominations for Best Picture and 3 Oscar wins in the decade. The man simply knew talent. After a decade of success, Mr. Fontaine was becoming quite powerful, and Louis B. Mayer knew he couldn't hold on to his services much longer. And he couldn't. Mr. Fontaine turned out to be quite the shrewd businessman on the side, and thanks to several real estate deals throughout the Hollywood area and other, some might say questionable, shady business dealings, he became quite financially powerful as well. With a quick stop as the head of Paramount Studio in 1960, by 61 he had enough power and wealth to start up his own picture studio, and Fontaine International Pictures was born. No more finding success for other people and their companies. Now it was his turn to solely benefit from his ability to spot talent. He hit the ground fast and ruthlessly, acquiring all the best talent he could, by either financial means or by physical force and threats. He got who he wanted. Fontaine International produced 32 films in its inaugural year, including several hits, with the film Kiss Me Right and Hold Me Tight, written under a pen name by cursed screenwriter Ryan Rush, and starring Marlon Brando, Sophia Loren, and Howard Keel, winning the Golden Globe for Best Picture and receiving a Best Picture Oscar nomination. Mr. Fontaine hadn't lost his gift for picking screenplays he knew would be a hit, and he found one in the beginning of 1962 titled The Blonde Had Fun That Summer, and he had the perfect blonde picked out for the lead role, Marilyn Monroe. $2 million was put into the production of the film, with Marilyn agreeing to star in the picture, along with Steve McQueen, Vincent Price, Dean Martin, and Julie London. The film did not get off to a good start, with production being delayed because of Miss Monroe recuperating from an illness, then delays of infighting with cast members and the director, and rumors of Miss Monroe showing up to the set constantly late and seemingly intoxicated on several occasions. Eventually, working conditions deteriorated so badly that Miss Monroe was fired from the picture and replaced by Jane Mansfield. The picture was a success, just like Mr. Fontaine knew it would be. And sadly, Marilyn Monroe died a few months later. There's 2 things everyone knows in Hollywood circles: Mr. Fontaine's eye for success, and to never cross him in any way, no matter how small the affront might be. After the failure of the Monroe hire, he was ridiculed for taking a chance on her, with the rumors already in the air of her being difficult to work with. Mr. Fontaine felt personally insulted and betrayed by her unprofessionalism, and he let his famous temper unleash. People don't know the true story of what happened that night, but in the early hours of August 5th, Mr. Fontaine sent his chauffeur/bodyguard, Fats Dom DeNetto. The henchman snuck into Miss Monroe's home and found her asleep in her bed. Next to her was a half-drunk glass of scotch on the nightstand and 1 full bottle of sleeping pills. He then approached Miss Monroe and put his hand over her mouth, then pulled out a needle, found a freckle to conceal the jab mark, and shot her up with a hot dose. The concoction was so strong in that syringe, it would look like she swallowed multiple bottles of barbiturates. Knowing that she had a history of taking pills, he emptied the contents in the bottle of the sleeping pills, then went into the bathroom and emptied more bottles of pills, then brought all the emptied bottles and sat them on the nightstand, making it look like she overdosed. Nothing she did that night would have resulted in her death. Sadly, she made an enemy of the wrong person, and history was forever changed. The story does not end with her murder, however. Mr. Fontaine's henchman, Fats Dom, was found the next day, dead, in his car. His brakes had been cut, and he drove off the side of the Hollywood Hills. An ad for a new chauffeur was placed in the paper by that afternoon. Sadly, this was not the only time Mr. Fontaine ruined a Hollywood career and ruined a life. From the smallest employee on the lot to its most important star, if you crossed him, he would ruin you. In some way or another, he chose many methods he had at his disposal to destroy a person: murder, blackmail, character assassination that would ruin one's reputation. Even asking for a favor could lead to a person's doom, especially if it were illegal. If you indulged in certain vices, such as gambling, drugs, alcohol, sex, anything for that matter, he'd have you right where he wanted you, and that's firmly in his grasp. He would either keep supplying the star's addiction or make a difficult problem go away. But the price it would cost would be your creative soul, and if you weren't willing to pay that cost, then he would make that personal vice come to light and ruin their career. Yes, blackmail might have been his favorite tool, but he wasn't afraid to go that darker route and delve into murder. Think of your favorite movie stars that died of mysterious circumstances: drugs, accidents, early cancer perhaps, even inexplicable murder. Well, sad to report, Mr. Fontaine probably was behind it. Having the medical examiner on the payroll paid off quite well for him over the years. James Dean, Sal Mineo, Errol Flynn, Judy Garland, Robert Shaw, William Holden, and countless others all died before their time, in all different ways, from natural to accidental to mysterious to even murder. But they all had one thing in common: they all ran afoul of Mr. Fontaine. He truly was the most evil, ruthless man in Hollywood, and the smart people knew to stay clear from him. Keep it strictly professional, or try not to have any dealings with him at all. Yes, he did launch 100 careers. You probably wouldn't have heard of some of your favorite actors or seen some of your favorite movies without him. But is it worth it? What's the price you'd pay for making it big? Would you tangle with the likes of the powerful Jack Fontaine? Let's go back to the Brown Derby and check in on our subject. As you can see, he's about to have his lunch, his tomato bisque soup, accompanied with a sourdough bacon grilled cheese, his favorite specially made lunch that he orders daily. As you might have also noticed, Mr. Fontaine having some snarky words for the waitress about his order taking too much time, and belittle her in front of the dining room crowd. Then you also saw said waitress turn and run out crying. Well, you'd be mistaken, and I don't blame you. It was difficult to notice if you weren't paying close attention. You see, the waitress who delivered Mr. Fontaine's meal did not run out crying. She ran out trying to contain a muffled laughter. She added something extra to his meal, some rat poison in the Parmesan cheese that was on top of his soup, some arsenic and strychnine inside the soup, and some sweet, cool, refreshing antifreeze masked in his glass of sweet tea. Oh, there it is. Look at his face. He's beginning to taste the special ingredients now. Look at the powerful Mr. Fontaine writhe in pain. Look at the complete shock and horror plastered across his face as he realizes his reign is over. His Hollywood empire is finished, crashing down as his head hits the bowl of soup. Oh, by the way, the waitress wasn't a waitress at all. Her name is Marie Constance, and she was one of the many who had their lives and career ruined by Mr. Fontaine. She was a promising young actress, being groomed for stardom, pegged to be the next great leading lady. Then Mr. Fontaine got a hold of her with his emptied promises and false dreams. But when she became pregnant with his child, he did away with her and ruined her reputation. She couldn't even find work doing commercials after that. So she waited years of plotting her revenge, and we just witnessed her finest acting performance. She will not be caught, for she does not work there. And she is wearing a wig and glasses, which she does not need to wear. A perfect crime carried out by a woman scorned. Mr. Fontaine might have been the most evilest player in Hollywood, but being evil can't help you when you play on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 11, Hollywood's Retreat, written by the Prowler. I take you on a journey up the California coast, northward, where the beaches and ocean horizons blend and fade into the forest regions of the beautiful state. I bring you to the Sequoia Inn, a lavish hotel nestled deep in the Northern California woods, where Hollywood's elite come to escape the city. The luxury inn and its secluded cottages are owned by a few of Hollywood's elite as well. Frank Sinatra and Gene Kelly bought the property after they filmed On the Town. They were later joined by Jimmy Stewart and Ann Sheridan when extra capital was needed to clear a few more acres for additional cottages. The famous quartet formed a strong partnership and hired the best, competent management and staff their money could buy. The property was not exclusively for the rich, but was a bit pricey to stay there. It, of course, attracted Hollywood's finest to get away and relax, which also attracted the tourists who could afford the price tag. The Sequoia Inn was always packed, always busy with the hopes of who would be seen walking through the lobby or lounging by the pool and seen eating at its gourmet restaurant. There is, however, another side to the lavish inn that's tucked away in the forests of Northern California. Behind its exteriors, behind the doors of the immaculate rooms, a dark side is present. But of course there is. You wouldn't be here if there wasn't. There are many rumors about the inn and the things that go on behind its walls. The property is not just supposedly haunted, but it is also rumored to be cursed, thanks in part to the supposed cult that meets there bi-monthly. Its ranks swelled with the Hollywood elite. Rumors persist that they meet at the secluded inn to pay homage to their dark lord for gifting them the talent to make it big. They sold their souls, and now they must pay a sacrifice. Of course, these are all rumors. There's no actual proof of such a cult existing that's run by the who's who of Hollywood. There is, however, a long history of the property being haunted, and it dates back to the demise of its original owner, famed silent movie director Bill Tex LaRue, who died on the grounds of the property from a horrific accident. The story goes that during filming of Mr. LaRue's final picture, The Lonely Woodsman, which was to star Charlie Chaplin, a rogue tree was cut improperly that was to be used in the scene, and instead of falling in the planned direction, it fell oppositely and crushed Mr. LaRue, killing him instantly. The movie was scrapped and never finished, and shortly after the accident, it was said you could see Mr. LaRue's ghostly spirit walk the grounds of the property, still barking his directions as though he was still on the set. His ghost is still said to be seen now, still walking and still directing. Another famous incident at the Sequoia Inn was the disappearance of Frank Mertz, an up-and-coming actor in the style of James Dean, contracted by Columbia Pictures and set to star in From Here to Eternity. Well, rumor has it one night, during Mr. Mertz's stay, he went down to the restaurant and began to drink heavily. He became belligerent and started to accost the wait staff. After many attempts to calm Mr. Mertz down, he finally submissed. But as he began to settle, he saw in the back of the room, sitting in the corner booth, singer Frank Sinatra, and also one of the proprietors of the establishment, his wife, actress Ava Gardner, and legendary actor Julian Craven. Mr. Mertz is said to have quickly gotten up from his table and marched straight towards the booth that sat the legendary stars. He made a fool of himself, insulting the three stars, first ridiculing Mr. Sinatra's declining singing voice and insulting the Sequoia Inn. Then the young Mertz insulted his wife, Miss Gardner, bad-mouthing her acting skills and her personal life. What happened next, no one really knows. There aren't too many accounts of the confrontation, for the people in the restaurant have been too afraid to come forward. There have been a few leaked rumors here and there, however. Most recall that in the middle of Mr. Mertz's tirade of insults, Sinatra lost his temper and smashed his glass against Mertz's temple. Then he and Mr. Craven began to beat him on the spot. It is said the guests that were in the restaurant looked on in terror and were eventually ushered out by the staff. What happened next, no one truly knows, but Mr. Mertz was never seen or heard from again. Some believe Mr. Sinatra's mob connections took care of the matter and made him disappear. Others believe both Sinatra and Craven beat Mertz to death and then called upon the famed Hollywood fixer, Eddie Tremantle, and he took care of the matter. Either way, it is believed Mr. Mertz didn't make it out of the Sequoia Inn alive. Then there's the matter of the supposed cult that meets in the furthest-most cottage located in the back of the property, Cottage 66. The cult of the Silver Devil, which supposedly consists of the most famous actors and actresses in the industry, are rumored to meet inside Cottage 66 and perform sacrifices to their dark lord, to whom they owe their careers. They might be just rumors, but eyewitnesses claim people that traverse near the cottage are never seen again, such as several of the hotel's wait staff and even some guests, which would explain the several missing persons reports and constant job openings at the Sequoia Inn. So the question is, do any of the things you've learned scare you enough to keep you from staying at the Hollywood Elite's Getaway Retreat? Or have you already booked your tickets? Is the thrill of seeing a movie star out and about so captivating and intriguing that you would risk your mental state, your senses, just to be frightened and tormented by spirits? Or what about your physical safety you're putting at risk by putting yourself near a bloodthirsty cult? I guess the price to pay is worth it, just to get close to stardom, but be prepared to pay that price when the bill comes. On the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 12, The Actress in the Garage. I ask you to cast your gaze in the direction of that young woman trying to get inside the mansion at Castillo del Mar, owned by movie director Roland West and his actress wife, Jewel Carmen. The woman with her bright blonde hair, dressed in her evening dress, wrapped in a fine mink, struggling with the mansion door, really sticks out in the cool December night, doesn't it? The woman you are observing is actress Thelma Todd, and as you can see, she just made her way inside the garage of the home, which is mere yards and in sight of Ms. Todd's restaurant she co-owns with the couple that owns this mansion. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, however, and while Ms. Todd is in the garage, let's take a look back and see her road to Hollywood stardom, shall we? Before we continue with tonight's mysterious ongoings. Let's start where most of these stories start, and that's back at the beginning. Ms. Todd was born July 29th, 1906, in Lawrence, Massachusetts. While growing up in a somewhat ordinary life, she mainly concentrated on her schooling, where she had hoped to one day become a teacher. After she graduated from high school, she enrolled at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell, where she continued her schooling. To earn money as a student, she went into modeling and entered several beauty pageants, eventually winning Miss Massachusetts. While out in Hollywood representing her state, she was noticed by a talent scout. She was quickly offered an enrollment slot to the Paramount Players School in New York, where they would teach enrollees acting, athletics, proper manners, etc. And if they showed well enough, they would then be sent to Hollywood to start their acting career. She and only one other member of her class, Charles Buddy Rogers, graduated to Hollywood, and not too long after arriving, she found work at Hal Roach's studios. She arrived at the latter stages of the silent film era of Hollywood, where she was able to land supporting roles thanks to her looks, but wasn't given many opportunities to show off her acting skills until soon after, with the arrival of talking pictures and producer Hal Roach casting her in pictures alongside comedy stars Charlie Chase and Laurel and Hardy. She performed so well that Mr. Roach decided to give her own series, a comedic series of shorts with a female partner, Zazu Pitts, hoping to form a female Laurel and Hardy act. The comedic shorts were successful, and she also landed roles in full-length features, including the film Corsair from 1931, directed by Roland West, whom she became romantically involved with, even though he was already married to actress Jewel Carmen. Ms. Todd continued her successful comedic shorts for the next few years with a new partner, actress Patsy Kelly, when Ms. Pitts left the act. Along the way, Ms. Todd also got married to Hollywood agent and producer Pat DiCicco, who, besides having believed to have mob ties, also was suspected with two other men in the beating and murder of comedian Ted Healy, which we discussed in an earlier chapter. The marriage between Miss Todd and Mr. DeChico was a turbulent and abusive one, and she divorced him after 2 years in 1934. She still had her lover, Mr. West, though. That same year, Miss Todd opened up Thelma Todd Sidewalk Cafe, along with her lover, Mr. West, and his wife, Miss Carmen. It is said Miss Todd was the face of the business, financially backed by Mr. West, and actually owned by Miss Carmen. It is, however, unknown if Miss Carmen knew of the affair between her husband and Miss Todd. Just like her previous marriage, however, it is said her affair with Mr. West was turbulent and that he was controlling and possessive. Now, we come back to tonight's developments, the present, the night of December 15th, 1935. Before our trip down memory lane, we witnessed Miss Todd enter the garage of the mansion belonging to her lover, Mr. West, and his wife, Miss Carmen. Sadly, she will not be seen alive again. Miss Todd was found the next morning, dead, reportedly dying from carbon monoxide poisoning resulting from her 1934 Lincoln Phaeton convertible running all night, which her body was found inside of. The police concluded that Miss Todd died accidentally, trying to keep herself warm from the cold December night after being locked out of the home. There have been plenty of rumors and conspiracies following her strange and untimely death, ranging from potential suicide, but there was no note and no known signs of sadness or a reason to do so, to the foul play rumors of her lover, Mr. West, murdering her. Those rumors also range. There's reports that there was no sign of foul play except for a small contusion on the lip. Then there are rumors that there were signs of bodily injury. There are also differing thoughts on how Mr. West murdered Miss Todd, from him killing her on his yacht, then bringing her back home and placing her inside her car in the garage and staging it to look like an accident, to him closing the garage door intentionally while Miss Todd was intoxicated and asleep inside her car. Sadly, we will never know the true circumstances behind the comedic actress's untimely death. Only Mr. West knows for certain, and he never told a soul. It just shows you can have a career in comedy and make millions laugh, but those laughs turn to screams when you try to laugh on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 14, The Collector of Hollywood, by The Prowler. I bring your attention to a man who doesn't have the talent nor the personality, or dare I say, at the risk of sounding cruel, the looks, to achieve his dream of being a Hollywood star. He has been turned away by every talent scout, agent, casting director, producer, and studio in the business. His auditions are known throughout the industry as being comically bad, and he has caught wind of their mockery and laughter. His name is Charles Napier, and while you may be able to say he didn't have the talent to be able to act to save his own life, the one thing you couldn't say was that Charles was a dumb man. He quickly realized he didn't possess the talent required for acting, but he was still determined to make his mark on the Hollywood scene. So he came up with a clever enterprise. He was ahead of his time, really, and became a Hollywood procurer, if you will. He realized Hollywood stars were hard to get close to. They were simply unattainable to their endless amounts of fans, but cleverly deduced that the certain fan would pay top dollar for, let's say, an item that was quite personal to their favorite celebrity. So he set out and followed every notable celebrity, collecting whatever he could get his hands on. He followed them out to eat, to restaurants, to the grocery store, to work at the studio, out on filming location. He even would stake out their homes and steal their trash. Even a time or two breaking in and stealing some personal items. He always brought a camera with him to verify the item's authentication for said purchaser, usually posing as a member of the press to get close to the celebrity and to explain the need for the camera. He also had his own darkroom and equipment to develop the photos so he would not draw attention to his activities. He became known as the procurer of Hollywood fantasies, people who dreamt of getting as close as they could to their favorite actor or actress without touching them. Of course, what better way to get close to that favorite Hollywood legend than having something that personally belongs to them, or something they've actually handled? Charles was absolutely correct in his assumption when he originally started out on this venture, that he would make a fortune. And let me tell you, the funds are rolling in. Through word of mouth, his friendships with certain auctioneers at some of the big auction houses in the country, coded ads in the newspapers, and his connections to some unsavory characters in the underworld, he's able to supply his customers with these personal Hollywood collectibles through a black market auction, if you will. Some examples to show the lengths he will go to procure a client's wants and asks, and to show why he's the best at what he does. First, when the legend Marilyn Monroe died, he posed as a member of the coroner's office and made off with several items, mostly wardrobe items such as undergarments, lingerie, and the like, which he made a fortune on. One particular item that fetched the most money, however, were her prescription bottles that were on her nightstand. They went to a gentleman who lived in Washington, D.C. Charles thought it was an odd item to want, but hey, whatever makes the customer happy. Charles pulled off the same scheme when actor William Holden was found dead in his home, resulting from a drunken accident. He procured the glass that contained his final drink of alcohol before he fell and hit his head, and took a few other items in the home, clothing and other trinkets. He waited a week outside the home of Ava Gardner and collected her trash on trash day. He's done that a lot, by the way. For some reason, certain clients just want things these celebrities have touched and used and have partially eaten on. Charles has even posed as waiters and busboys at restaurants to take away the plates of food of certain clients' favorite celebrities. He's been a busy boy as of late. He's gotten requests lately for intimate pictures of people's favorite movie stars around the house. Some tasteful requests of their favorite star, just doing ordinary mundane things around the home. But there have also been the more risque requests, such as nudie shots. Charles' motto, however, is to each their own. He does not discriminate or deny any request. Which brings me to why we're here for tonight's latest edition of The Dark Side of Hollywood. Charles is out on his latest request, and we should check in on him. See him in action, if you will. As you can see, he's perched in the tree, looking in on the master bedroom on the side of a very lavish-looking mansion located on Weeping Willows Lane, nestled in the Hollywood Hills. This is the third night Charles has been on a stakeout in front of the mansion. Originally, the client only wanted pictures of their favorite star, but then they asked for a few personal items. First off, we should start by telling you the mansion that Charles has been staking out for the past couple of nights belongs to the legendary actress Julie Lamont, who we've covered in a previous story. The items that were requested are a silk black robe that has an S and a D symbol embroidered on the left chest area, and some of Miss Lamont's skin creams and lotions, for she has been around for decades and never seems to age, so the client thinks it must be what's kept her looking youthful. We see Charles up in the tree waiting for the opportune moment to strike. He can see pretty much the entire grounds from where the tree is located. The front gate, all the way up the long winding driveway, the main house, which is large and sprawling, and the backyard, which consists of lavish manicured grounds, a swimming pool, and a large guest house. It seems, however, Charles has come on a busy night tonight, for up in his tree he sees black limousine after black limousine pull up the driveway. He has been watching Miss Lamont get ready for the past hour, but obviously it was not to go out, but to host guests. He watches as movie star after movie star exits their limousine and enters the mansion. Actor John Wayne, the screenwriter Ryan Rush, horror icon Vincent Price, bombshell Jane Mansfield, actor Burt Lancaster, and a plethora of other celebrities entered the mansion, and the strange thing that was noticed by Charles was that they all had a silk black robe draped over their arm. He then turned back and looked into the bedroom and noticed Miss Lamont was finished getting ready, and when she left, she didn't take her robe with her. He could see it hanging from her closet door. It was perfect, he thought. While she is busy downstairs hosting her party guests, he could sneak in and take the items. As soon as the lights turned off in the master bedroom, he descended the tree and made his way to the side of the house. He then quickly scaled the lattice attached to the side of the mansion and climbed all the way up to the window that led to the master bedroom. Once inside, he quickly gathered and bagged up all the beauty lotions and creams, then went for the robe. Right as he grabbed the sleeve of the robe, however, the lights turned on. Before he could say anything, though, he heard a voice whisper, "We've been expecting you. Welcome to the party." The room went black as he was struck over the head with a heavy object. When he came to, he was surrounded by all the celebrities he had seen enter the mansion earlier. They were all wearing their robes. He then looked over to Miss Lamont. She smiled at him as she slipped into her robe. "My butler has noticed you outside the house the past few nights. You thought you were sneaky, but you weren't good enough. I'm just glad I was correct in you trying to break in, and on tonight of all nights. How fortuitous for us. You see, we needed a sacrifice," she said, as she laughed sinisterly and looked around the room to her guests. As Charles continued to look about the room and survey his surroundings, he noticed he was sprawled out in the center of a pentagram, surrounded by candles. He knew he had made a mistake. He knew his time was up. Then they all pulled out a dagger, and it was lights out for old Charles, for he just had an encounter with a rumored Hollywood cult, the cult of the Silver Devil. He made a lucrative living and made a name for himself on the Hollywood scene by sneaking into famous people's lives and their homes. But be careful whose home you sneak into when that home is on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 14. A Killer on the Set. Written by the Prowler. We find ourselves in a place where many people wish they could be. That is, at least the people who long for a career in the spotlight, a career in front of the silver screen. The place I'm referring to is on a movie set, filming on location in a small town nestled up in the mountains. We see a group of people who achieve their Hollywood dream jobs and are in the process of a day's work. We're on the set of the newest horror movie in the earliest stage of production, titled The Theater Walls Run Red. The film stars an aging Vincent Price, Donald Pleasance, Jack Palance, the ageless Julie Lamont, and newcomer Sebastian Rosemont, who the studio has spent a year grooming to be the next great star, with the film's screenplay being penned by the cursed screenwriter Ryan Rush under the pen name James Barrington. The studio spared no expense and gave the film a deep budget, especially for a horror picture, but important executives in the studio offices saw the rise the horror genre was taking and wanted to be a part of the early slasher craze. So needless to say, the studio was all in. The small town of Raven Tree Falls, Oregon, was selected, complete with a main street and old-timey theater. It was perfect for the setting of the script. Speaking of which, the plot of the film mainly takes place within the theater, where it begins with the local thespians rehearsing for the town's annual stage production for The Mask of the Red Death. But seemingly, an accident happens, killing the star of the play during one of the final rehearsals. We soon find out, however, it was not an accident, and that 3 of the main actor's co-stars killed him over jealousy and resentment because his acting talents had gotten him noticed in a ticket out of the small town to Hollywood. The years go on after the supposed accident, and the 3 actors who killed their co-star have become local celebrities, known for their entertaining, reliable acting throughout the years, have made them popular around the region, and are considered amongst the better theater actors in the West. We now arrive 19 years after the horrible accident, and it's just a few weeks from the town's annual running of The Mask of the Red Death. The 3 original actors, or shall we say killers, have returned to reprise their roles as they do every year, joined alongside a young ensemble led by a young gentleman who is the understudy to the lead actor of the play. Then, over the course of the 2 weeks leading up to the play's opening night, mysterious accidents begin to occur, injuries and things going missing, even things being destroyed. Then, as it gets closer and closer to opening night, the cast begins to disappear, until we're at the last night of rehearsals, and all that is left are the original 3 and the young understudy. It is then revealed that the young understudy had a father who acted, and this was the 20th anniversary of his death, where he died in a tragic accident during the final rehearsal for a play he was starring in. The young understudy then revealed to the frightened 3 who his father was, and that he knew they killed him. He then ruthlessly kills the 3 aged actors, saving the star of the show for last. You were my father's understudy, and you killed him over jealousy. Now I'm your understudy, and I kill you over revenge. We're then shown the next night, which is opening night. The excited townspeople, alongside local dignitaries, file into the theater and take their seats. They sit and wait patiently. Just then, the theater lights darken, and a spotlight hits the stage as the curtain rises. When the curtain is completely lifted, the audience begins to shout in horror as the entire cast is revealed to them, posed on stage, completely butchered, torn from limb to limb. The screen then fades to black. The end. The role of the lead actor who dies in the beginning and who is the father of the young understudy, Killer, is being played by Jack Palance. His 3 murderous co-stars are legends Vincent Price, Donald Pleasance, and Julie Lamont. And finally, the young understudy, Killer, is played by the up-and-coming star, Sebastian Rosemont. The production was going as smooth as a Hollywood film could ask, minus a day or two, disrupted by the weather. The actors got along very well, and each respected the other's legendary status, and the younger cast looked on to the established stars with respectful admiration. The film was actually on schedule, despite the few days here and there missed because of Mother Nature. This can be attributed to the fact that the legendary actors on the set perform their scenes effortlessly and precisely, turning out to be a producer's and studio executive's dream. However, things came to a slowdown a few weeks into filming when mysterious accidents and strange occurrences began taking place. Sets destroyed and items going missing directly from the set, and even personal items from the stars' dressing rooms. The first big accident involved injuries to 3 of its most prominent stars, Jack Palance, Donald Pleasance, and Vincent Price. These injuries were not major, but it slowed things down a bit. The production did not come to a complete halt, however, and the remaining cast and crew wrapped up the scenes that did not involve the injured 3. Before those remaining scenes were finished, however, and before the injured legends could return, more tragic events transpired, with the disappearances of a few extras and crew members behind the camera. Then, just a few days before those remaining scenes were to be completed, the ultimate tragedy took place. A grisly murder was stumbled upon when the cast and crew showed up to set that morning. It was a member of the younger cast, an actress by the name of Claire Montrose, a supporting character in the film. This, of course, halted production for a few days and frightened the remaining cast and crew. The studio, however, did not want to stop production, for it was almost to completion, and they had already sunken multiple millions of dollars into the picture. They made assurances to all remaining cast and crew, especially the legendary Julie Lamont, that their security was the #1 priority, and extra guards would be hired, and the police presence on set. Now investigating the murder meant they were completely safe. That might have been the case for a few days, but once again people started to disappear. Multiple cast members at this point, including Julie Lamont. Blood was found strewn inside her dressing room, but no trace of Miss Lamont, just a bloody note saying wait till tomorrow. The studio up till this point had done a tremendous job of keeping everything under wraps. The accidents, the slowed production, the disappearances, even the murder. The press did not get a whiff of anything, but the studio execs realized they would have a hard time trying to cover up a star like Julie Lamont missing. The next morning came, and the director and producers, along with a security detail, made their way onto the set, which at this point was taking place at the town's old theater. As they entered the auditorium, multiple gasps could be heard echoing out throughout the cavernous room, ending with a blood-curdling scream from a young female production assistant. Up on the stage, lined up in a row, was the missing cast members, all sitting down and all decapitated, their heads neatly placed on their laps, including the legendary Julie Lamont. As the group looked on in horror, loud clapping could be heard from behind the curtain, up on stage. Then out walked Sebastian Rosemont, the rising star, covered in blood and holding an axe by his side. The young man was stark raving mad, cackling about his masterful performance, and that he was going to win awards for his work. He was quickly apprehended and whisked away to a mental institution. The studio covered everything up, the deaths, everything, including that of the legendary actress Julie Lamont, which the studio explained that she had died from a tragic illness, and because of such shocking events, decided to scrap the picture altogether, for the movie could not be made without her. As for Sebastian, no one knows why he did it. Some say the pressures from the studio and their expectations for him. All of their time and resources of trying to make him the next big star was just too much for him to handle, and he simply snapped. Others believe it was his extreme style of method acting that drove him to it. He just simply went too far and immersed himself completely into the character seeking his father's revenge. Whatever the case, such macabre delights like this can only be found when you search for them on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood by The Prowler. Part 15. Cursed Films. We all love movies. They let us escape our chaotic lives for a short time and bring us every form of emotion the mind and heart allow. Everyone has their favorite genre, that being romance or comedies, action or westerns, but since we are traversing the dark side of Hollywood, we will be talking about the horror genre. Most everyone enjoys a good scare, and everyone is entitled to one good one. The pleasure and adrenaline a good horror movie can bring is pure delight. While no two horror fans are alike, everyone has their personal preference for horror, after all. That being the classic horror movies of Dracula, Frankenstein, and the like, or slashers of the 80s, supernatural movies of ghosts and poltergeists, or aliens, and finally zombies taking over the world. However, what everyone can agree on is the joy of the scare that these movies bring. While you're sitting at the theater or at home on the couch, however, have you ever thought what went into making your favorite scary movie? The trials and hardships, the setbacks, the accidents, and dare I say, the deaths. In some cases, a string of misfortunate events so strange that you would think the film was cursed, and in a few cases, some believe the film actually was cursed. In tonight's edition of The Dark Side of Hollywood, we're going to delve into a few cases and shed light on some examples of the macabre that have transpired during the making of some of your favorite horror movies. Horrific things that have happened on set, and horrible things that have happened to some of the stars themselves that starred in these supposed cursed films. The first film on our list is The Exorcist. Everyone knows of this classic, and is regarded as one of the scariest horror movies of all time, if not the scariest. It has frightened millions from its opening, which caused a chaos amongst viewers that has never been seen, to all the way up until now. But did you know that real-life terror befell the movie set as well? From deaths surrounding cast and crew, including family members, to accidents on set, which caused multiple delays in production, The Exorcist is regarded as one of the most cursed films in cinematic history. Or is it all just simply coincidence? Let's delve in. First of the incidents happened early on in production when a bird flew into a circuit breaker, which caused a fire which burned most of the set. Everything except Reagan's room. This incident stopped filming for 6 weeks. Then later on, a sprinkler system broke, destroying another set. And a statue of Pazuzu was shipped to another country, causing a further 2-week delay in filming. Accidents to the sets weren't the only things occurring, unfortunately. They were also happening to the cast and crew. First, accidents to stars Ellen Burstyn and Linda Blair while filming their scenes, causing both back injuries and leaving both with long-lasting effects. Other accidents on set occurred when a carpenter cut his thumb off and a lighting technician lost a toe. Deaths, unfortunately, also took place to cast and crew, and even their family members. Actor Jack McGowran died a week after filming his scenes. The actress who played Father Harris's mother died before filming wrapped, exactly how her character died. A night watchman died, and also the operator for the refrigeration system for Reagan's room, and an assistant cameraman's newborn. Linda Blair's grandfather died during the first week of production, and after his first day filming his scenes, actor Max von Sydow had to go back home when he learned of his brother's death, which caused production to be further delayed. Then, one of actor Jason Miller's sons nearly died when they were hit by a motorcycle, and finally actor Paul Bateson, years after production, was convicted of murdering a journalist. Are these all just strange occurrences? Just horrible coincidences? Or was there something more evil afoot? Some people connected to the film believe the latter. But what do you believe? Next, we will delve into the Poltergeist films. Many believe this franchise to be cursed because of the accidents and the untimely deaths of some of its stars, some which contribute the curse stemming from using actual human skeletons during the filming of the swimming pool scene in the first film. The untimely deaths of the film's young stars help further the beliefs of a curse. 5 months after the filming of the first film, actress Dominique Dunne was murdered by her abusive ex-boyfriend just outside her home. The franchise's young star actress Heather O'Rourke died while filming the third installment in the franchise from an undiagnosed bowel obstruction. She was only 12 years old. Actors Will Sampson and Julian Beck both also died untimely deaths from cancer. Were these tragic untimely deaths caused by the use of actual human remains on the set of the first picture, haunting the set and its cast and crew, as some believe? Or are these tragedies just sad coincidences of everyday life? You decide. The next film on our list is The Omen. This film is believed to be cursed by some because of the subject matter which it is based upon and covers, the Antichrist, and the accidents and near-death experiences to the cast and crew, certainly don't dissuade the people who believe there is a curse. First off, the film star Gregory Peck and the film's screenwriter David Seltzer took 2 different planes to the United Kingdom to begin filming, yet both of the planes were struck by lightning. When the film's producer, Harvey Bernard, was in Rome, lightning had just missed striking him. The Rottweilers hired for the movie attacked their trainers, and the hotel the film's director, Richard Donner, was staying at was bombed by the IRA. Plus, he was hit by a car. Later, during filming, Gregory Peck canceled a flight he had booked to Israel. That flight he had canceled ended up crashing and killing everyone on board. On the first day of filming, several crew members survived a head-on crash. Even after filming had wrapped, special effects artist John Richardson was injured and his girlfriend was beheaded during an accident on a different set. Once again, are these all just horrible coincidences, or was there something more supernatural afoot? You decide. Our last cursed film we will be discussing is The Theater Walls Run Red, a story we delved into not too long ago on the dark side of Hollywood. This film is believed to have been cursed the moment the screenwriter Ryan Rush was hired to pen the script for the early slasher film. He also has been the subject of a past episode for being cursed himself, and that his screenplays usually have a way of becoming a macabre reality, and that is what many believed happened here. The film was befelled by accidents and deaths. Production almost came to a complete stop when the film's 2 main stars, horror icons Vincent Price and Donald Pleasance, were involved in on-set accidents. Then cast and crew started to go missing, only later to be found dead, murdered horrifically by the young star that the studio had been grooming to become the next big thing, Mr. Sebastian Rosemont. With all the accidents and death, the film was scrapped, never to be seen, even though there are rumors of a rogue copy in the wild. People believe, who were connected to the film, that the cursed screenwriter Ryan Rush had struck again, with another one of his cursed screenplays coming to life. Or was it just the pressures by so many on one individual the cause of this horrible tragedy? As always, you decide. These are just a few supposed cursed films. Whether these films were touched by some malevolent force or just the simple tragedies of life, we will never know. Next time, however, when you're at home or in a darkened theater watching your favorite scary movie, stop and think how real is the terror you're watching. What horrible things did the people who made this movie actually go through? Because it might not always just be good acting, especially when your favorite horror movie was made on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 16, The Contract, written by The Prowler. In this next installment of The Dark Side of Hollywood, I bring you a man. As you can see, we find him sitting on the end of his couch, drinking from a glass of scotch. The sounds of laughter can be heard from the next room, from his young family, a wife and 2 children, a boy age 5 and a girl age 7. While you would think the man would be happy and in the next room enjoying time with his family, he is actually quite the opposite. He sits, staring off into the distance as he drinks from his glass, filled with melancholy and fear. As you can also see, the gentleman we are studying seems to be well off, by the looks of his surroundings, and you would be correct in assuming that, for we are in the living room of rising movie star Damian Royce, and we find him with the world crashing down on his shoulders. First, we should probably start from the beginning of Damian's story. Born in 1932 on the coastal shores of Maine, he got into acting from a young age, thanks in part to his mother, who encouraged it greatly. He acted in town theater productions and continued his acting through high school and started to get noticed in the surrounding area. After high school, he had plans to travel to New York and enroll in acting school and try his luck on Broadway, but he was called to fight in Korea. After serving his time in the Army, he decided to head out to Hollywood. He had continued his acting while over in Korea whenever there was a stage show put on to entertain his fellow troops when there was downtime. In doing this, he had become friends with a private first class, Roger Harlow, who had a brother named Johnny, who so happened to be the fastest rising agent in Hollywood. Johnny Harlow, alongside his partner, Eddie Tremantle, a top Hollywood fixer and provider for their clients' needs, was the fastest rising firm in Hollywood. Everyone wanted their representation, even already established stars, and Rogers said he would make the introductions when they returned to the States. He was true to his word, and Damian was quickly taken on as a client. With the top agent in Hollywood, Damian had no problems finding work. First, a few TV shows to get his foot in the door, such as a few episodes of Dragnet, The Rifleman, and Peter Gunn. He was usually cast as the villain, with his bulky frame and dark features, such as his hair and eyes, and was getting a good reputation for it too, thanks in part to his good looks and his charm. Damian was nervous at first as being typecast and worried he would never get the chance to be a leading man. But Harlow came through once again and procured his young client the lead in an upcoming crime noir titled In the Dark, Even Angels Sometimes Kill, co-starring Jane Russell and William Holden. The film went on to receive moderate success and was considered one of the better films of the genre, turning Damian into a rising star. The role seemed to pour in after that, with his rugged good looks and acting ability, plus having the best agent in Hollywood. It seemed nothing could stop his rise. He did a few more noir films, then co-starred in one of the Oscar favorite films of the year, The Rose Bloomed in Winter, starring Julie Lamont and Julian Craven. He won the Golden Globe for Best New Star and was nominated for an Oscar for his role in The Rose Bloomed in Winter. His career was fully on the rise, becoming the top box office draw for Fontaine International Studios. To continue the momentum of his rapid rise, the studio gave him the lead role in their upcoming Western, Sundown at Diablo River, co-starring the studio's top-rising female starlet, Frances Kirkwood, and Lee Van Cleef. To help push the picture to the press and public, the PR department of the studio put out a statement saying the young rising stars began dating during the film's production. The idea came directly from the ruthless mind of the head of the studio, Mr. Jack Fontaine, who we've covered in a previous episode. The thought was, if a rumor was leaked to the world that the two fastest rising stars in Hollywood fell in love on set, that it would drive ticket sales through the roof. Plus, it would help grow their stardom. This was all, however, just a publicity stunt that all the inside players knew about, except for the young starlet, Frances Kirkwood, And that's where the problem comes into play. Chalk it up to being young and naive, or maybe not being the brightest bulb in the chandelier. But young Frances actually fell in love with Damien. She believed the plan to actually be true, even though everyone who was involved tried explaining to her what was going on over and over again. Every event the couple was asked to attend, she fell more and more for him. She became obsessed, and even with her confusion and increasing aggressiveness, Damien tried to remain calm and understanding and remain friendly with her. I said earlier that it seemed there was nothing that could derail his meteoric rise, but on the night of October 12th, his star was almost extinguished. That was the night of the party the studio threw for the completion of production. The evening started out fine. The cast and crew were all in attendance, along with their families. Also a few members of the press, executives from the studio, and even other stars from the studio showed up. The booze started to flow, however, and Frances, after downing one too many Hollywood sunsets, her favorite drink, by the way, started to become boisterous and unruly. She grabbed Damien by the arm and dragged him in front of the members of the press who were there and announced they were to be married after the release of the picture. Damien's eyes widened, not believing what he had just heard. He smiled and went along with it, not wanting to blow their cover so close to the picture's release, and not wanting to embarrass her in front of everyone. But inside, he was crumbling from the stress of the situation. He began to drink heavily. He found a table in the corner to be alone with his thoughts. He didn't understand why this publicity stunt the studio forced on them wasn't going smoothly, and why Frances didn't understand that this relationship wasn't real. He also felt bad because he didn't want to hurt her feelings. They were at least friends, after all. Staring at his glass, he was interrupted, mid-intoxicated thought, by Frances. She yanked him up out of his seat and brought him over to the group of gentlemen who devised the PR stunt, including Mr. Fontaine. She became belligerent with them, saying she knew what they were doing and that everything better go through according to plan, or she'd expose this ruse and other shady things this studio was involved with, particularly concerning things involving Mr. Fontaine. Even in his drunkenness, Damien tried pulling her away from this conversation. He knew that you don't poke the bear. That is Mr. Fontaine. He has heard the stories of that man's temper, but as he pulled her away, she became more louder, pointing at the group of men, saying, "I'll expose you all. I'll expose all of it," for everyone in the party to hear, including the members of the press. Damien tried to get her to calm down and quiet her voice, but little did they know how furious Mr. Fontaine already was. Eddie Tremantle was at the party, not only because Damien was his client, but he had just been hired by the studio to become its top fixer. He walked over to the two to see if everything was okay. He looked at Damien and shook his head, then whispered the situation was not good and that he should probably drive Frances home. Damien agreed and got Frances into his car, and they drove off. There was only one problem. Damien was in no condition to drive, and after a few miles he lost control of his car and crashed into an electrical pole. Fortunately, someone from the party was following them. Unfortunately, it was a member of the press that also happened to be secretively on the studio's payroll. Eddie Tremantle was quickly called, and he arrived shortly after to assess the situation. Both of the young stars were still alive. Damien apologized to Frances
before he was ushered into Tremantle's car and driven away by his assistant back to his home to sleep it off. Damien did not wake until the next morning, where he was greeted by his housekeeper, bringing him some coffee and the morning paper. He drank from the cup of coffee to wake himself up, then opened the paper. He completely lost his breath as he read the headline on the front page. Young star crashes car, promising actress Frances Kirkwood dead at 22. Damien couldn't believe what he was reading. She was fine when he left her side yesterday evening. Also, there was no mention of him being at the accident, or that it was her car, which confused him greatly. Just then he was interrupted by his housekeeper, saying he had visitors. It was his agent, Johnny Harlow, and Eddie Tremantle, and the head of the studio, Mr. Fontaine. Damien was in complete shock, asking what happened. What happened to Frances? She was fine when I was taken away. Little did Damien know, he was trapped. Trapped by this horrible situation, and trapped by his horrible employer. They told him the scene was completely cleaned up, and every trace pointing to him was removed. Mr. Tremantle got rid of his car and had an associate retrieve Frances's car from her home. They crashed it into the pole and placed her body inside her vehicle, making it seem she was alone and lost control of her car because of her intoxication. The time of the accident was also reported to have happened later, to give Damien the alibi of dropping her off at her home after the party, to account for the people seeing them leave together. So the story they concocted and fed to the member of the press who was there, and who was also on their payroll, was that Frances continued to drink heavily when she was dropped off back at her home, then decided to go for a drive and crashed her vehicle. There had been countless witnesses at the party to attest to how upset she was, and the story worked perfectly. In reality, Eddie Tremantle placed his hand over Miss Kirkwood's mouth, suffocating her in her front seat, her threats and words at the party sealing her fate. Mr. Fontaine then pulled out a lifetime contract and handed it to Damien to sign, and he was being blackmailed to do it. They told him if he didn't, they would reveal his part in the accident, that he was driving, that it was his car it actually happened in. Then a file of pictures was thrown in front of him, pictures taken from the member of the press that was there, showing the two of them knocked out in the front seat. Damien had no choice. He signed the contract, signing his life away in the process. He lost control of his career with the stroke of a pen. Mr. Fontaine now controlled his life. What kind of films he made, appearances he made, how much he made, and interviews he had to do. It was definitely rough at first. The only bright spot was him meeting and falling in love with his future wife, Brandy, on set of one of his pictures. She was in charge of hair and makeup. After they were married, they had 2 children and raised them in a lovely home in the Hollywood Hills. In the backdrop of their happiness, however, Damien was being worked to the bone. Movie after movie, appearance after appearance, the strain on him and his family being told what to do was taking its toll. As the years passed, it was becoming harder and harder. His career was still successful, but he was aging, and his box office numbers were starting to slip, just a little. In private conversations with his wife, they talked about him retiring. The conversations would sometimes become strained when he told her it was impossible for him to retire. He wanted to. He wanted the same things as her, but he knew Fontaine would never let him go, and he couldn't tell his wife the truth why. Damien had flirted with the idea of retirement before, but was always shot down by his agent or Tremental. But now he was aging and his numbers were slipping. He thought maybe this time would work. There was just too much stress at this point. He was being pulled in every direction, and it was putting a strain on his marriage. He just wanted out of his contract and live in peace with his family. Back to the present. That's why we find him in his living room, with the stress and weight of the world seemingly on his shoulders, and the look of despair on his face. Harlow, Tremental, and Mr. Fontaine just left his house. An argument ensued when he brought up retirement. They threatened him. They would tell his wife about his past, about the accident, and leak it all to the press, and ruin his career and family's name. Now he sits on the couch, lost and defeated. He gets up and goes into the next room and kisses his wife and children, looks into his wife's eyes, and says after today, everything is going to be all right again. He tells her he's going to go upstairs to take a shower. After an hour and not hearing from him, but still hearing the shower, she goes upstairs to check on him. The door is locked. She knocks on the door and asks if everything is okay. There's still no answer. She bangs louder and becomes frantic, shouting for him to answer. Still nothing. She runs down to the kitchen to get a knife and try to pry the door open. When she eventually does, all she can do is drop to her knees and scream. There before her eyes is Damien, hanging from the door of the shower. The blackmail in the contract, after years, became too much of a strain on him and his family. Lifetime contracts are supposed to bring wealth and security, unless you sign that contract on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, written by the Prowler. Part 17. The Singer. We find ourselves out amongst the Hollywood Hills, and below us we see the convertible of singer and new leading actor Johnny Tisdale. He has a date with him on this crisp night. Nestled deep within his arms, they stare out towards the brightly lit city landscape. The neon glow atop the El Capitan Theater, along with the signal lights brightening the distant sky, means only one thing. It's premiere night. The stars are out, mingling and celebrating their latest work. But that's of no concern for our couple in the convertible. Well, yes, a movie premiere is exactly the type of event you typically find a star such as Mr. Tisdale at. On this night, however, he was enjoying the seclusion with his date, a nice lady by the name of Frances Smith. They had been dating for a few months now. She is a secretary for one of the production chiefs at MGM Studios, and they met while Johnny stopped in the office to sign a few contracts. The location they are parked at is a nice secluded spot, not known to the public, and it can only be accessed through a gated maintenance road that adjoins the property of legendary movie star Clark Gable. Nestled up in the hills, think of it as a spot where the stars go to rest, or in some circumstances, relieve stress. Rumors of its existence has given it the nickname, the makeout point for the stars. Johnny, however, had bigger ideas than just a night of romance up in the Hollywood Hills. Tonight was the night he was planning on asking Frances to marry him. He was on a streak of success in his career. The past few years have seen him achieve 5 chart-topping songs, 2 albums of the year, and since coming to Hollywood, a slew of supporting roles in some of the biggest movies that have come out. All of this recent success has landed him his first starring role, with filming beginning in just a few short days. Everything is looking bright for the young star from Las Vegas. But he considers the best thing that's happened to him up to this point is Frances, and that's why he wants to marry her. Finding love as a star is no simple task. Not knowing the other's intentions or if their love is true can be quite difficult. But he knows he has found his soulmate. Tonight, he thought, will be the greatest of my life. As they continue to sit and look out towards the horizon, listening to the soft music gently playing from the radio. Fireworks brighten the sky from the movie premiere down below. This was the time, he thought. This was the perfect time to propose. He then removed his arm from around Frances and told her he had a surprise. He got out of the convertible and walked towards the trunk. He grabbed the ring, which was in his coat pocket, a single red rose, and a bottle of champagne, then quickly made his way back to Frances. Her face lit up when he returned. He handed her the rose. "This is for you, my love," he said as he sat down. As he was uncorking the bottle of champagne, the mood was suddenly dampened a bit when the music abruptly stopped and was interrupted by a breaking news bulletin. "This just in. The authorities are reporting 2 more victims of the Tinseltown Ripper, a.k.a. the Hollywood Ripper. Movie star Leopold Drake and his wife were found slain in their backyard home in Beverly Hills. This marks the 5th celebrity that has fallen prey to the Hollywood Strangler. Police have issued a warning to the famous citizens of our city to be vigilant and mindful of their surroundings and to keep a lookout at all times. More updates soon to follow. Now back to your regular scheduled program." The sound of love music flooded the inside of the car once again, and as it did, the cork from the champagne bottle popped into the night sky, causing the worried Frances to gasp. "What's wrong, darling?" Johnny asked concerningly. "Weren't you listening? The Hollywood Ripper struck again. Aren't you scared, Johnny? This sicko is out there killing celebrities, and you're a celebrity. I think we should get out of here," she said in a frightened tone. "Yes, I heard it, darling. And yes, it is quite worrisome. But no one knows of this place, and couldn't get in even if they tried," he answered assuredly. "You know, when I was at the studio the other day, I was talking to Glenn Ford, and he swore he thought he saw this so-called Ripper walking up the street towards his car as he and his wife were getting out. He said he spotted him in the corner of his eye, and when he did, he grabbed his wife's arm and they quickly ran inside their house and called the police. But the man had disappeared," he said as he handed her a glass of champagne. "Thanks. That story doesn't make me feel too much better, Johnny." "Oh, don't worry, my love. We're perfectly safe up here." He then told Frances he had a surprise and pulled out the ring. A tear fell from his eye as he told her that she was the best thing that has ever happened to him. More than the fame, more than all the success. He smiled and told her he loved her with all his soul, then asked if she would be his for eternity. She began to cry and nodded her head yes. The perfect night was ending beautifully. They embraced and began to kiss, but wrapped in their lover's embrace, they did not notice the bushes behind them begin to move. From the bushes emerged a hooded man holding a shotgun. 2 shots rang out into the quiet night sky. followed by 2 bright flashes lighting the hilltop for just a moment. The 2 lovers were found the next morning, still in each other's embrace. Johnny Tisdale and his love Frances, the latest victims of the celebrity killing Hollywood Ripper. Johnny had it all: fame, success, and a love that was true. But that combination can be lethal when it's found on the dark side of Hollywood. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.